Welcome to the Forge Truth Podcast, where we are building great men as God defines greatness. Forge is a movement of men with a mission to help all men realize they are the deeply beloved, redeemed sons of the Most High God. I'm your producer, Zach, and I'm here to discuss the issues that affect men the most with our two hosts, Dr. Pete Alwinson, lifelong pastor and leader of Forge, and Jayson Quiñones, Bishop of Core Faith Church in Oviedo, Florida. Men, welcome to the show.
Hey, how you doing?
Great.
Good.
It's good to be with you guys.
I'm glad you're here.
I'm glad to be here.
You're a bishop, but I, as I say periodically, I'm not kissing your ring.
Well, it's good. I didn't wear a ring today at all, so
I know.
there's no option for that.
I know. There it is. There it is. Oh, man.
Well, guys, it's good to be around the table with you again.
Yeah.
And we do have a guest in the studio today. It is Mike Henderson. He is a financial advisor from Crossover Point Advisors. He's a kingdom advisor. Mm-hmm. We're going to learn what all of that means. But Mike, I want to thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Good to have you here, Mike.
Yeah.
We've known each other for a long time.
We've known each other for a long time. Yeah. I'm a Forge guy from day one. So
yeah, that's right.
It's been a long journey. So
it has been. Yeah.
I had a good one.
Yeah, that's right.
I didn't scare you away. You sat at my table. That's how we met. And we've grown into a good friendship and relationship. Yeah. So got to know you and your family. And
plus, you're the only bishop I know.
And you're the only man that has ever called my wife by another name.
Oh, jeez.
I didn't get killed for that, but they do bring it up. So whenever I'm trying to tell you who you are, anytime that I'm like, yeah, Mike, and she's like, Mike, who? I'm like, Lisette, Mike, and yeah. So anyway,
the guy that called her Lorraine.
Yeah, it's a good thing that I have a niece. It's a good thing I have a niece named Lisette because that.
That's right. That's right. It was Lisette. That's right.
That's right.
Yeah. He called my wife. He called my wife Lisette, and I was like, "Oh my Lord!"
No. Elaine.
Yes,
Elaine.
Yeah. And she was there.
Wonderful Elaine.
Right at Masters Academy.
Yeah.
Am I turning red yet?
No. It was good though, man.
Well, Mike is a financial planner, but he has an interesting story. But he also is an extrovert. I mean, he's not shy.
Yeah.
Right.
That's what I've been told.
Yeah. What's your story? You're from South Florida, for crying out loud. Bring us up to speed. What's God done in your life for the last few years?
I'm from South Florida. I am one of the things that a lot of people don't know about me is I'm adopted. And so I was adopted in 1962. Grew up in the same places that Jason here grew up. We were Broward County boys, and my family, they are pioneers of Oakland Park, the city of Oakland Park. They've been in that city since 1914, my grandparents.
Wow.
Back when it was, basically dirt and oak trees. And so I grew up down there, just a typical suburban kid, and went to high school, got okay grades. I'm a musician. I played a lot of trumpet in high school. I actually wanted to be a professional trumpet player. I was accepted to the University of Florida as a music major and going to minor in music education. And at the very last minute, I pulled the plug on that and started working at Publix supermarkets. Actually, I was already working at Publix supermarkets, and I saw a bunch of young guys there that were making more money than my parents. And so my attitude was, why go to school? I didn't like school anyway, and I didn't think I had the goods to really be a professional trumpet player. So I was looking at becoming a jazz. I was into jazz. That was my thing. So it would have been New York, Las Vegas, or L.A. was the plan after college, and so it was. But what was interesting about that, I grew up in a Methodist church, and my parents basically told me from age 13 on, like, you don't have to go if you don't want to. And this is a true story. I was riding my bike through the parking lot of my old church, of my church, and I saw a couple of girls there with a couple of friends of mine. And I was riding my bike because my car was in the shop. And so I was 17 years old, and I stopped to talk to them, and they were going to a youth group rope swing at a rock pit down there, because we don't have lakes, we have rock pits down there, right? And so they were like, you want to go? And I'm like, yeah. And so we did. I went there, and shortly after that, I started attending the youth group and started getting interested in the things of the Lord, and his word resonated with me. And there was a guy there, the church didn't have a full-time youth director, so there was a guy there that was actually part of Youth for Christ. And the next thing I know, probably, I don't know the date, but it was probably sometime in September of 1980, after I graduated high school and after I didn't go to college, that I came to Christ. So, it was no doubt about it. God's hand was all over it.
He called you out and pulled the trigger and said,
that was it.
Come on.
And I'm like, now what do I do? Right. So, and then fast forward a year and a half later, I met my wife, who actually worked for my mother. My mom was a deputy clerk of the court down in Broward County, and she was my wife's boss. And I went in to pay a ticket and liked what I saw. And 44 years later, it's
wow.
It's still happening.
Now,
so,
was she a Christian when you met her?
She was not. She was raised Catholic. I don't know if Pete, you may have heard of the Greenhouse down in Fort Lauderdale. You ever heard of the Greenhouse?
Maybe.
That was an outgrowth of Coral Ridge Presbyterian.
Okay, yes.
And I was going to Bible study 2 nights a week, and
John Huffman. Did he lead it?
I have no idea.
Okay.
And so I took her there, and the first night you had to go to the orientation class, and she prayed to receive Christ, and the rest is history. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So I was missionary dating.
Yeah.
And but when you're 18, you don't really care.
Right.
And a brand new Christian. So we married in 80, and this all ties into the money part of it. We married in April of 83. And I was a full-time baker at Publix. So I'm a fully trained scratch baker.
Wow.
Back when Publix used to make it from scratch. And there were rumors going around that Publix was going to open on Sunday. And so I got promoted in January of 83. The only reason I took a management position was so I could get out of my parents' home. I lived with my parents till I got married. And so I could afford to do that. And so I basically was in management. Everything was going okay. I was an assistant bakery manager, and they were closed on Sunday. And then I told my boss, if we open on Sunday, it's going to be a problem for me. And he basically said, okay. Told the boss, his boss, who came in the week before my wedding, would have been April 2nd, and said, Mike, this is exactly how the conversation went. He said, Mike, I understand you have a problem with working on Sunday. And I said, yes, sir, I do. It's against my religion. And he goes, okay. He goes, starting next week, I'm busting you down to baker $6 an hour. And so on my wedding day, technically, I became a baker.
Wow.
Okay. And so I took my stand, I counted it all joy. And I actually had the weekends off. So my wife and I get back from the honeymoon. She's working, at the courthouse. I'm working there. We're living like two young marrieds, and everything's. We had the weekends off. I could go surfing, and the rumor at Publix, by the way, was that I really wanted to step down so I could go surfing on Sunday.
Yeah.
Which is ridiculous because waves happen every day. It doesn't matter if it's Sunday or not.
That's right.
And so then we were living in a 1-bedroom apartment, going along fine, and then a year later. She got pregnant with my now 40-year-old twins. Okay.
Wow.
And my girls are identical twins. They live up here. Kathleen is Anders is the children's ministry director at Willow Creek now. And so shortly after that, my wife lost her job for being morning sick, basically, which is something that couldn't happen now. I got busted out of management with something that couldn't happen now. And we knew with 2 kids that, we didn't have the money for daycare. My bills were $1,400 a month, and I was taking home $1,000. So I went and sold life insurance part-time with a little company called A.L. Williams Corporation.
Oh, yeah, A.L. Williams.
And when I made money, everything was good. When I didn't sell any insurance, things weren't that good. And my dad was supporting me. And it got to the point where Dad couldn't give me any more money. I didn't know it. He was actually taken out of his equity line. Wow. And he wanted me to be in this career. And he felt like, I think he felt like being a baker was just not really what I was built for. And so he, God bless him, he did what he could. And then finally he said, you know what, Mike, I can't do this. Now, keep in mind, I'm a Christian, but I'm a baby Christian for the most part. And, I had struggles with the idea of tithing, because when you're only making $1,000 a month and your bills are $1,400 a month, I don't know where that other 10% is coming from. But and that was something that I felt like was a yoke that was put on us at Coral Ridge. Okay, but having said that, basically, my dad said, "Hey, I can't give you any more money," and so I went to the deacons, and they gave me half of my rent.
Wow.
And then a friend of mine came over who happened to be one of the guys that was instrumental in leading me to Christ. And he came over and he wrote me a check. He goes, "I don't know why I'm writing this check," but he goes, and it was the other half of my rent. And I wasn't mature enough to realize that God had just come through. I was humiliated. I felt like I had taken a stand for him and honored him, and he didn't honor me, and by not being in management. And so I basically said, "You know what? I'm done." And me and God didn't really talk much for about 5 years. And I felt like he had let me down. And sure enough, when I went into management, I started making more money. Family had enough money to pay the bills and buy a little house and all that sort of stuff. Had to work on Sundays, not every Sunday, but a few, okay? And but that's how my attitude about money started, okay? And we struggled. I mean, we really struggled. And so fast forward, I'm in management up until about 1990. I'm promised a promotion to the next level, which was above the retail level. And by 97, I'd kind of figured out that wasn't going to happen. And so I started looking around. My wife had been a stay-at-home mom for 13 years, and she went to work. She started making more money than I ever thought she was going to make. And not a lot, but more than I thought she'd make. She doesn't have a college degree either. And she worked for an architect who was an elder in our church. And he literally changed the trajectory of our lives big time. And so when she started making good money, I'm like, I don't have to do this anymore. And I had some money to fall back on for my retirement. And so I took a job with American Express Financial Advisors, which is now Ameriprise Financial.
Yeah.
And that was in May of 99. And I had my retirement to fall back on. And I came out like a house of fire. I was the number 6 guy in the state of Florida for first-year advisors. I mean, I did really well my first year. And then, a couple years later, right after September 11th, my wife lost her job. So now we've got essentially half of our income is gone. And that's when the second phase of money problems started. And this time, instead of shaking my fist at the Lord, I basically said, "Okay, God, what are you trying to teach me in this whole thing?" And God was working in my heart. I was more mature. If I have a life verse, my life verse would be Romans 8:29. For those whom he foreknew, he also predestined to become conformed into the image of his son. So my attitude is that everything that happens to us, good and bad, is happening to us with the idea of, or with the purpose of conforming us into his image. Okay. So that's how I approached it. And, but that didn't mean that I wasn't blowing through the savings and, paying penalties to the IRS and all that stuff. And, so in 2005, I went to Merrill Lynch and, thought I could start, building my net worth there. And then we all know what happened to Merrill Lynch. And so all that stock that I was given when I came over.
We sort of do. That was, it's a little hazy in my mind.
I have no idea what happened.
Yeah, what happened to Merrill Lynch?
All right, so basically Merrill Lynch had a bunch of bad debt on their books that their CEO at the time had held on to. And when the mortgage market fell apart and the housing market fell apart, they held the worst of the worst. And
what year was that?
That was 2008.
Yeah,
so
okay.
we were going to go out of business.
That was the downturn of 2008.
Lehman Brothers went out of first. Bear Stearns went out of business. Then Lehman Brothers went out of business on, I believe, September 16th, and then Merrill was going to be right behind them on Tuesday. That was like a Saturday. Okay. And we're all, we're the thundering herd, right? We're all like, wait a minute, you told us we had $85 billion in backups, which didn't go very far when you owned all this garbage that was on your books.
Right,
okay?
right.
It's a whole nother podcast. But having said that.
No garbage on your books.
Yeah,
no garbage on your books.
It was garbage.
By the way, as a footnote, the church I served as senior pastor that year, we had just finished our biggest building program, the fourth one. And we had it down. I mean, the pro forma worked. It was going to be great. And then 2007, December 2008 happened, and then people started moving away out of Orlando, and people lost jobs.
Everybody has Mike Tyson says everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth.
It's exactly right. And that was a punch in the mouth to all of us.
Yep.
Anyway.
So Merrill, I left Merrill, and that's when I became an independent advisor.
Gotcha.
I had earned my certified financial planning designation while I was at Merrill Lynch. And I basically went to another firm, and I've been there since. And I was introduced to Kingdom Advisors, believe it or not. Kingdom Advisors is an organization. It's a professional organization that trains people like me to provide biblical counsel.
Okay, on money.
And the biblical counsel on money is designed to increase giving to kingdom purposes. So it's not it's not really a Dave Ramsey thing. It's not necessarily a Crown thing. It's more of providing counsel to affluent Christians that really have enough money. They don't have to worry so much about nickels and dimes, and helping them figure out where their finish line is and what they're going to do with the rest. So let's say you got a business owner.
What do you mean by finish line?
Well, so let's say you have a business owner who's making $300,000-$400,000 a year, right? And he or she sells their business, and let's say they sell the business for $20-25 million, and they're 60 years old. They're not going to spend all that money, okay? So by helping them realize that they have reached the finish line, they've got more than they're ever going to spend in their lives, and if they're believers and they believe that God owns it all, it's the why question. Like, why do I have this money? What am I going to do with it? And so that is, in essence, what Ron Blue, who started the organization, the company Blue Trust is what it's called now, his company. He's no longer involved, but he basically started teaching guys like me. And right now we've got almost 4,000 certified Kingdom Advisors in the country.
Wow, good.
And we gather once a year here in Orlando for a massive conference. And we have some of the best speakers in America, Alistair Begg and some of these other types of Christian leaders that come in, Louis Giglio, and talk to us. And then we have all kinds of other training that we do. And we have a monthly study group. So I got involved in that in 2009, and I've been a member ever since.
Is that all you do?
No.
Okay.
No.
So you do regular people like us who don't make that much and never will be able to sell a business. You deal with the average person too.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, because of everything I said about Publix, I may as well say my niche is Publix associates. So 70% of my clients are from Publix.
Isn't that something?
And they're retiring with a fair amount of stock, and they got to figure out what to do with it, right? So, and I'm, I don't want to say this on the podcast, but I'm an expert on. You can cut that out, Zach, if you want. I'm an expert on their rolling the
in particular,
yeah. But it's very transferable to anybody who's got a 401k or something like that. So I'm dealing with. I'm not doing budget counseling for young couples or anything like that, but I am. I do work with people that are mostly approaching retirement in some way, shape, or form. So.
Well, so what you've given us this idea here of the 4 H's of financial wisdom. Why don't you lay out some of that? Because I think our guys, money's a big deal, right? At the beginning of the month, nobody wants to know that you just love Jesus. You got to pay your bills.
That's true.
You got to take care of your family. And at Forge, we talk about identity, purpose, character, confidence, and legacy. And under purpose, we're leaders, we're worker providers, and warrior ambassadors. But the worker provider thing is we tend the culture, but we also have to provide for our families. That's a big part of what we do and why we work. Yeah. So we do need to think about money from a biblical perspective,
right?
Which is hard to do.
Well, and when I was introduced to Kingdom Advisors, that's when I started getting serious in my own heart and mind about my heart issues about money, right? So the biggest thing, and you've got heart, health, habits, and hope on this form. The heart issues are every spending decision is a spiritual decision. Okay, if God owns it all. And when I heard that, I was like,
that's big.
I know. And I was like,
that's a huge starting point. Do you guys believe that?
Well, yes, I do.
Okay, well, the deeper question, do you apply that? Do you live like that?
No, I don't.
And I can say
I try to.
And I can say I don't apply it. I don't apply it.
I don't think anybody really applies that, right? Like when you, I think the statement is absolutely true. Like every decision.
Where does that come from?
Where
that God owns everything.
The Bible.
Yeah.
He owns a cattle on 1,000 hills.
That's right. And the hills.
Yeah.
And the hills, right?
And the hills, right.
Yes. I think that's psalm. It's a psalm, is it not?
Yeah.
Okay.
But it's you've been bought with a price, therefore glorify God with your body.
Yes,
so he owns us. We've been bought. We've been purchased. I love it. That's a good answer. It's from the Bible.
It's in the Bible. I mean, it's there. But I think it's true, right? It's an absolutely true statement, right? Every financial decision we make is a spiritual one, but we don't live like that. Yeah. Like you talked about tithing, right? And you and I have had conversations about tithing and things like that. I think that I think that tithing is an important principle. I think that anyway, but I think in marriage counseling, one of the questions that we ask is, so what's wrong with this statement? God requires 10%, but you can do whatever you want with the other 90%. And the problem is that's the training, right? It's like, just as long as you give God 10%, you're good. You're blessed. You're gonna. And I think that there is truth in the fact that there is a portion of our finances that should be designated specifically toward kingdom purposes solely. But then I also think that we have to realize, man, everything that I do with that other 90% or 50%, you have Randy Alcorn, I think he lives off of 10%, gives 90%, right? So let's do that. Let's put that yoke on people. No, I'm just kidding. We don't want to do any yoke, right? But I love that thought where it is, man, every decision we make with our finances is a spiritual one.
Yeah,
but we don't want to hear that.
So I want to go off on that for a second, but I do want to put tithing into place. My conviction is that tithing was the Old Testament starting point, but they often challenged people in the Old Testament to give more. But in the New Testament time, God has purchased us, and so what Paul tends to emphasize is that generous, hilarious sense of being able to give it away, so that he owns it all. What can I live on? Having said that, as my mentor Steve Brown often says, he says 10% is a good starting point, because if it weren't for that, my wife would give everything away. So I mean, I think it's a good starting point. God has called me to live on 90%, even though he owns it all. But I do need to eventually get to this hard issue of where am I spending my money practically.
Well, let me just say this, and then I would agree with you 100%. That, and we're talking about percentages, 100%. I agree with you.
47% of all statistics are made up on the spot. I want you to know.
Well, no, but I agree. Like when you think about tithing, I think the tithing principle trains your heart. When you look at it in the perspective of, okay, before I'm going to do anything else, I want to honor the Lord with my finances, and thinking in that, what am I going to give directly toward, kingdom things? And I think the principle of tithing, it goes before Melchizedek, Jacob, when he's going, he's like, hey, he pulls this 10% number out of where? It was somewhere. That was a principle. I give you a tithe of everything, right? And so I think that it's a pre-law principle. And I think when you move into the new covenant, I believe that it's so much the heart issue of like, man, everything belongs to you. So why would I, and I think about a guy in your position. I'm making $1,000. My bills are $1,400 and I got to give $100 and now I have $9. Where's this other $5 coming from? Man, I did great math there. That's pretty impressive, but where is that? Like, that's tough, to get your head around that. And so, it's hard, but
you sound like you've been there.
No. Oh, we've listen, man, we've had, we could do another podcast, but I mean, we've had things where we have had all of our money pulled out, because Elaine left a job and she had, I told you about this, she, worked commission only, and 3 months worth of income we put away in savings so she could look for another job. She quit on a Friday. gave a resignation. Monday morning, we were negative something because they pulled the money out. And so we had to go to court, and it was months that we had to walk through a process of trusting the Lord. And for us, this is our heart in this. We were pulling money out of retirement monthly for a couple of months to stay afloat. And every time that we got that money, even though we had already tithed it before, because we're like gross tithers, so we would tithe again and like, Lord, this is still yours. So that was just our heart. Like, man, we understand who our provider is. And and that was one of the principles. I wish I could give you the exact verse, but that was one of the things that God says, I think is in Deuteronomy, where he talks about tithing, so you learn to fear the Lord and you learn to realize like, hey, man, he's the one that makes you can sow all the seed you want, but the one who makes that seed grow is God. Your animals can do whatever they want, but the one who allows them to get pregnant is the Lord, right? So none of this is because you're so great. So anyway, man. So the heart issue is where it is.
Yeah. And when I first heard that statement, that every spending decision is a spiritual decision. Yeah. My first thought was, well, there goes the boat. Because I had wanted a boat back then. And so ultimately, just to show you where I am spiritually, I bought the boat. So, I tend to lean on to the generosity side of it more. And again, there's a guy, his name's Jay Link, actually, wrote a book a white paper called Tithing, the Enemy of Generosity. And it goes back to what Jason said about people think, I give 10%, I don't have to give anything more. Well, there's people that should be given way more than 10%, and there's people that are like I was, struggling to give anything.
See, that's a big point. There's you can live below your means, you can live at your means, or you can live above your means, right? It's better to live.
There's a lot of talk about that now. It's called lifestyle drift.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we talk about is that God doesn't give you more. I'm going to come back to that, okay? I can't think of the saying. Anyway, but yeah, for me, it was a journey of trying to get my heart right first.
Yeah.
And realizing that, one of the other things I want to say was too, that stewardship is not about what you do with the 10%, it's about what you do with the 90%. Okay. And to your point.
Yeah.
And so that was, it's been
well, in a sense, it's what you do about with the 100%.
Exactly.
Right. Who we are.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's more than just the 10%.
And there's more verses in the Bible about money, wealth, and possessions than any other single subject.
That's a big deal.
Yeah.
So you start with the heart, and then you move. You go to health and habits and hope. What are you talking about under health?
So one of the things is that there's really only 4 uses for money. Okay, you can either live with it, live on it, grow it, grow. Live, give, and grow. Okay, so the money you live on is what you live on, right? The money you owe would be your taxes and your debts if you have any.
Yeah.
And then the money that you give, okay, wherever you give it, and then the money that you grow, which is your investments, the money that you're putting away for later on.
Yeah.
And ultimately, that pie is only so big, and so how that fits into each one of those categories goes back to the heart issue. Okay, and what was interesting though is Zach brought up a good point that there is something else you can do with money, and you can bury it in the backyard.
Yeah, right.
And I never thought of that before, right? So, and that's when we were talking offline about the parable of the talents. But so that is just realizing that there's only 4 things you can do with money, 5 if you count owe twice, right? It's just an easy way to remember that that's all you can do.
That's good. That's good. And then the 5 principles, biblical principles, having about your habits, because habits are where we lock in the truth into our practical life.
Absolutely.
So what are those, real quick?
Well, so it depends on where you want to start, but giving generously, right? Avoiding the use of debt, setting long-term goals, and planning for financial margin, okay? And all of that is driven by spending less than you earn. That's the hard part for me, okay, is having that margin. I mean, I've had money and I've been broke, and it's that margin and maintaining that margin has always been a struggle for my wife and I.
But there's a lot of freedom with margin.
Oh,
isn't there?
Well, and that's the thing. If you don't have the margin, then you're not going to be able to bless other people like you might be able to do otherwise.
Good point. Good point. And I always used to worry as a pastor, what if the washer breaks down? I am dead because I don't have a sinking fund for that washer. I don't have a savings account for that thing.
Well, there's a lot of people that are, especially young people that are living in that way.
Almost every young couple is going to face that, right?
Yeah.
That's the reality. You don't have any margin when you get started. And that's why it forces you to, as a Christian, think through the biblical principles of giving and begin to discipline yourself in the fight. And I want all young couples to experience. Our kids are all grown and married now, and they all struggled. I love it. It's good, and they grew through it.
Yeah.
But then you talk about hope, tomorrow's promise. What's the deal on that?
Well, the promise is that if you live by these principles, you're eventually, Lord willing, going to have some sort of a surplus, which is more, that's the last one on the margin meter. You're going to have a surplus. You'll be secure financially, even though we all know that Christ is our security, right? It's not, if you're depending on your money to be secure, that's another issue, another hard issue. But in our society, it does bring a certain amount of economic security. But the last one is having a surplus, which is having more than you actually need. And that is where that's where generosity comes in.
Yeah. Yeah, and maybe that quote, or we could come up with a quote of something like, God doesn't give you more money just so you can spend it on yourself. He doesn't do that. He says, is it Corinthians? It's in the Bible. I just don't have the verse off the top of my head. He is able to make all grace abound to you so that you may abound in good works. And I should have that verse off in my head. But that's a powerful thing. He doesn't just make us wealthier than we need to pay our bills, just so we can spend it on ourselves.
Well, and there's a lot of talk in the world now about this. They've labeled it, it's called lifestyle drift, and where your lifestyle continues to go up as your income goes up.
Sure.
And this is what I was trying to think of earlier. God doesn't give us more so that we can raise our standard of living. He gives us more so we can raise our standard of giving.
Okay, there you go. That's a better quote than,
Pastors like that quote.
It's
a good.
God blesses you to be a blessing.
No doubt. I mean, one of the other principles I've learned is, do you want to be a sink or a faucet? A sink holds everything that comes into it and doesn't let any of it go. And a faucet, it comes through the faucet. Your wealth comes through. For those of us, especially who are living in America, I've got a son-in-law who works for Wycliffe Bible Translators, and he's in the fundraising side of it.
Yeah.
And there's people that are living in the jungle, right, that are learning other languages. And so it struck me one day. I was thinking, if we're here and God has blessed us to be here, we're the engines that are driving.
That's right.
The missionaries and the ministries. And if we can create margin in our lives, that frees up additional assets for kingdom purposes, which is the entire thing that Ron Blue was trying to get across when he created all this.
This is so powerful. I do believe God raises up people who just make money. They just know how to make money. They do it, his people. And so they can give. And I know a lot of people with a high net worth, and they are really generous people. Really generous.
I've learned that too, that they're not...
Everybody thinks that wealthy people are all stingy.
No.
That's not always the case.
Not in the kingdom.
And not in the kingdom.
Especially it shouldn't be in the kingdom.
That's right.
I agree.
That's right.
I've got a friend down in South Florida who's not a Christian that makes more money than I'll ever dream of making. And he's in the wine, women, and song department. That's what he's doing. Let's eat, drink, and be merry.
Yep.
And so, he's going to have to wrestle with that at some point in time about the why. But that's essentially the difference between the Christian mindset about money and the non-Christian mindset about money.
Heart, Health, Habits, Hope, Ron Blue Institute.
Yep.
How can people get in touch with what you're doing? What's the contact?
Well, you can go to kingdomadvisors.com, and there's some stuff on there for the public and for guys like me, resources and that sort of thing. You mentioned Randy Alcorn earlier. He's one of the guys that spearheaded this this whole movement, and he talks about you can't take it with you, but you can give. You can't take it with you, but you can give it ahead.
Send it
right?
ahead, yeah.
You can store it up your heaven. Your store up your treasures in heaven, where rust and moth don't destroy.
Yeah.
I'm getting a little tongue tied here for some reason.
That's good. That's Jesus right there.
Yeah, and so we all know that we need stuff to live here, but to live on this planet, and like you said, to be providers and stuff. But so yeah, it Kingdom Advisors. The biggest thing is, and this is one of the things that I've struggled with since 2009, is that there are a lot of Christians out there that don't know about Kingdom Advisors. So that's one of the reasons. I wanted to come on this program just to be able to let people know that there are advisors. There are other advisors in Forge. There's at least one other one in there who is a certified Kingdom Advisor and takes this very seriously. He hasn't been coming to Forge for very long. And so, for a Christian to be getting advice from someone who doesn't know the Lord and doesn't have a stewardship, eternal mindset, I just want to make sure people know about it.
Yeah.
And FaithFi is another. I don't know if you guys have heard of FaithFi on the radio. It used to be it was Larry Burkett's show, and then it was Howard Dayton's show, and now it's Rob West's show, and they've changed the name to, it was Money Guide or something like that before. Now it's called FaithFi, and Rob West, who happens to be the president of Kingdom Advisors, is also the guy on the radio now.
Oh, that's great.
And Dayton, he's here in Orlando, and
he's a friend of mine. He's a great man,
Yep.
great man. Howard Dayton's really who helped get me started thinking about these things.
Yep. So
That's good.
Fantastic. Well, Mike, thank you so much for joining us on this episode. It's been great.
I appreciate it, Zach. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to thank everyone at home for listening to this episode of the Forge Truth Podcast. If you have any questions or comments, you want to join the conversation, you can email us at forge@forgetruth.com. You can also leave a comment on this video if you're watching on YouTube, and be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel as well so you get every new episode when it comes out. Jason, do you want to leave a challenge for our men today?
Yeah. So, Dr. Pete, the verse that you were talking about is 2 Corinthians 9:8.
Of course.
So it was right there.
9, yeah, that's right.
I just looked because it was the finance one you were thinking about. I just wanted you to,
right, yeah.
but you quoted it perfectly, even though you know the address. It's all good. And the verse I was talking about is Deuteronomy chapter 14, verse 23, and I'll read it. It says, and this is God speaking to the children of Israel, and you shall eat before the Lord your God in the place where he chooses to make his name abide. The tithe of your grain and your new wine and your oil, of the firstborn of your herds and your flocks, that you may learn to fear the Lord your God always. Guys, I will say this: God does not want your money; He wants your heart. And you need to keep that in mind above anything else. When this fear of the Lord is not to be afraid, but it's to just recognize that He is the one who provides all. He owns it all. And He shares it with us graciously. And that's why we give. But at the end of the day, it's not about giving as much as it is about being a good steward. And so we got to be good stewards, man. Our families need it, and our churches need it.